On today's episode of the Full Subjects podcast, we are going to be talking about the 5 things that you need to be doing if you plan on buying a home in 2026. And we are coming at this from like the first time home buyer angle. But with that being said, if you are already in the market and thinking of making a move, a lot of these topics will apply. So 1, thank you for joining us. And 2, we look forward to, Cole's laughing at me, covering all of this stuff with you. As always, guys, this podcast is for informational purposes only. It does not constitute any legal, tax, investment, financial, or any other advice. It's not intended to cause or induce breach of any existing agency agreement. Number 1, let's talk about understanding your finances. So, Cole, if you're planning on buying a home in 2026, what do you need to be thinking about on the finance end to make sure that you are prepared for that purchase?
So that's a great question, Austin. When it comes to understanding your finances, there's a few things. I think the biggest thing is understanding how much money's coming in and how much money's coming out. A lot of people think they have an idea of what that number is, but once they actually start to keep track of their expenses, especially their expenses, they start to realize where their money's going. This is really critical because if you've been renting for a while or if you've been used to a certain cost of living, there's a good chance that's going to change when you buy a home. It's good to know where your money's going. And if that cost is going to change and it's going to go up, do I have the extra money on a monthly basis to be able to manage the extra cost of buying a home? That's really, really important. A couple other things are your credit score. Most people have a pretty good idea of what this is. And nowadays, it's actually a lot easier to determine. Most banking apps you can literally click on and they'll give you a pretty good estimate of what your credit score is. Rule of thumb here is, if you have a credit score of 680 or higher, you're going to be able to typically get a loan with a prime lender or an A lender, and you're going to get the best rates. This is not a one size fits all. I'm not saying that you can't possibly get better rates if your score is below that, but just as a rule of thumb, 680 or above, most cases you're going to get the best rates out there. And then the other thing is, are you carrying any high interest debt? Now, why does this matter, Austin? I'm going to put you on the spot here. Why does it matter?
Obviously, that is going to probably hinder your ability to borrow a little bit. Right. One of the conversations that I'm sure you have with people frequently is like, hey, if I've got a little bit of credit card debt, am I better off to pay that off before actually saving up to move? Or is that something that if I get into a place, I can still continue to tackle? I think that can also be a bit of a unique question because like if you have the funds available, why not just pay it off? But I know that you did not get me to ask this question so I could answer it, so I'll let you answer it.
First and foremost, Austin, you're absolutely right. It will impact your ability to borrow. Now, in most cases, we don't want people to stretch themselves as far as possible when it comes to borrowing, but unfortunately, Austin and I live in a real estate market that's quite expensive. And in a lot of cases, we need to maximize qualification based on somebody's income in order to get them into the home that they want. So as much as we may not want that to be the case, in some cases, that's going to happen regardless. And just to elaborate on this a little bit, card debt is one good example. Car loans are another good example. And I'll kind of contrast the two. So credit card debt, while it's high interest debt, the required payments on credit card debt are actually quite low. Typically, you don't have to pay the full balance, whereas something like a car loan is going to have a fixed monthly payment, and we have to use that fixed monthly payment. Let's say it's $500. And that's going to affect how much you can afford to pay on your mortgage because the bank has restrictions on how much they can lend you based on other monthly obligations that you have, like a car loan. So just to summarize that, a car loan is going to hurt you a lot more than credit card debt in most cases when it comes to qualification. So those are the kind of debts that we look at and we go, okay, well, we can't necessarily pay off your car right now, or maybe we can't sell that car, but just know that it's going to impact your ability to borrow. So it's good to know that information so that your expectations going into it are realistic and you're not like, oh, based on this online calculator I plugged numbers into, it said I could borrow this much. Well, we forgot to factor in things like your car loan when it comes to that. Austin, what's one more thing here that everybody should be doing if they're a first-time home buyer? You alluded to this at the end of 2025, but obviously we're now in 2026. So what's one more thing people should do?
If you missed our episode at the end of 2025, first, how dare you? But second, open your first home savings account. That is a really great tool if you plan on purchasing, even if you plan on, even if you just open it and move some of the funds that you have for your down payment into there to move it out. Again, talk to an accountant, talk to Cole. They're better with the numbers and the money than I'm going to be. But again, there's some benefits to doing that. So make sure to open your first home savings account if you have not already done so.
Thank you, Austin. You hit it right on the head there. First home savings account for first-time home buyers is one of the best accounts out there. We're not going too much into it today, but please open that account. So
if I can add something to this section too as well, when we're talking about like determining your down payment, whether that's savings or gifts, have those conversations with your family members, even if it's a couple grand or a little bit of money helping with closing costs. A lot of times family, they do try and help their kids or their grandkids get into the market. That's something we see very frequently. I know last year, there was an article that was put out by a large bank. I believe it was CIBC, but it was talking about down payment gifts and the average size. And it was a crazy number. But the point of this is, hey, if this is the step that you want to take this year, start having those conversations with whether it's, mom and dad or the grandparents and say like, hey, if if this is one of my goals for this year, is there any way that you can support me in that? And, again, Cole being the numbers guy, but even a couple grand adding to your down payment, that can start to change your monthly payment quite drastically. And obviously, one of the things we'll talk about later in the episode are all the additional costs to moving. But again, even if it's a couple grand, it goes a long way in getting into the market and potentially what you're qualifying for. Maybe that's the difference between getting that, just into the market, whether it's a studio or maybe a one bed, or maybe you're able to get that den, or maybe you're able to get that 2-bedroom place and get a little bit more runway out of your first home. So it's just important to have those conversations before you pull the trigger on getting into the market.
Yeah, very well said, Austin. So as you alluded to, let's jump into number 2.
What a segue. We have to determine our home ownership costs.
We do.
So a couple of those will be ongoing. So we've separated these into 2 categories. Your ongoing ones will be your mortgage, your insurance, your property taxes, your utilities, and your maintenance fees. And then your one-time cost will be your property transfer tax. There is possibilities for exemptions for first-time home buyers. So that's great. And again, we'll talk about that. But then also some of the costs for getting into the market one time would be your inspections, your appraisals, your conveyancing legal fees, your moving fees. Depending on your age, maybe you can get away with the buddies with pizza and beer movers. But, maybe you're a little bit older and that company doesn't work anymore. But let's talk about some of your ongoing costs and maybe we can strategize a little bit on like some tangible advice on how to navigate this. We talk about mortgage, insurance, property taxes, utilities, and maintenance. What are some tools that people can maybe do if they are wanting to help understand these numbers better?
Yeah, so I mentioned it actually in step 1. There is some online calculators, and I was kind of giving it a hard time by saying that we maybe can't capture everything within that, but there's still a good baseline when it comes to mortgage costs. For a general kind of number right now, you're looking at, let's say, between $500,000 and $600,000 for per $100,000 borrowed. So let's say you borrow $500,000, you're looking at about $2,500 to $3,000 a month. Why that's a range is going to be a few factors. It's going to depend on your down payment. It's going to depend on the amortization. There's a few factors in there, which is why I'd like to play with a range as opposed to giving you guys exact numbers.
Correct.
But that's kind of a good baseline, is that $500 to $600 mark per $100,000 borrowed.
Mm-hmm.
Insurance, it's an ongoing cost. It's going to be pretty fixed based on how much, like what you're buying. Ultimately, it's what are we trying to insure, and that's what insurance is based on. If you're, for example, a car, if you buy a Ferrari, the insurance is going to be more than if you buy a Honda Civic. So it really depends on what you're buying and what you're insuring. Property taxes, this is an interesting one because you can't negotiate your property taxes per se, but you can determine how you want to pay your property taxes. So you can pay them periodically, which means you pay them every month. Some lenders will let you do this through the lender. They won't all. The other option is you can actually do it directly through the city in many cases, where the city will draw every month based on what they anticipate your property taxes to be. They hold that money for you. And then typically in July, they will then apply that towards your property taxes. If there's any shortfall, then you have to make up that shortfall, but it saves you from having to come up with a large amount at one time. It's basically a forced savings account for your property taxes that they then use to apply to property taxes. Utilities, I mean, this one's self-explanatory. A lot of people that are renting may already be paying their own utilities, so this isn't new to them. And it's obviously going to vary on how much usage. So more electricity, you're going to pay more. Same with gas. Those are on the low end of costs when we're talking about these. Those aren't going to be major. Maintenance, I'm going to get you to actually talk about maintenance a little bit, Austin, and why that may be a cost for some people and may not be, or maybe there's actually a fixed maintenance cost.
Yeah, I think, when you were talking about utilities, one of the things I was going to potentially talk about is depending on where you're purchasing, some stratas will cover some of your utilities. And what I mean by that is that'll be, baked into your strata fees. So for example, if you're buying in a condo building and they have a boiler system as opposed to like a hot water tank in the unit, your hot water is probably going to be included in your strata fees. And often, sometimes too, you'll see gas included as well. So, that can obviously save you some of your money, quote unquote, when you're budgeting. In some cases, your strata fees might be higher, but this is why you budget things. And I have something to add shortly for that. As far as maintenance fees, so yeah, there's different ways that you can look at that. Part of that might be your strata fees that you consider maintenance fees. Depending on the age of the strata or the building that you're buying in, you might be purchasing into a strata where maybe some work is coming and you want to budget for that. As opposed to sometimes when you're doing your due diligence and reading the strata documents, you might find a strata that is really well maintained, doesn't have work coming up. Obviously, there can be some random things that happen, like you can't control everything, but those are some things to be mindful of, I guess. And the most tangible advice that I would give anybody who is thinking of getting into the market, Cole had mentioned, there's Excel sheets or stuff like that online. Even just creating your own and being like, okay, if you're an employee and you have a salary, what am I bringing in each month? What are all of these different things going to cost, and have an idea of like, if this is the case, then I should be saving, X amount of money per month on top of what I'm making. And that can go towards savings, investments, other stuff, right? You don't want to have every single penny going to just living. That can be very stressful. And again, spend your money however you want, but I would maybe advise against that or recommend against that. But just keep track of what's coming in and what's going out, and have a budget and have something to follow is really important.
Absolutely. Yeah, very well said. Let's jump to one-time costs here. And Austin mentioned a couple, and Austin and I always make notes before the show. So I'm going to throw in an extra one here is GST, Austin. When it comes to newer places, that's another one-time cost that a lot of buyers need to be aware of. Now, thankfully, I have to be careful here because there's a new GST rebate coming into effect. It's actually technically in effect, but there is no way to actually receive the rebate as far as I know right now. And the reason I know this is because I'm working with somebody who's going through this process, and they haven't actually formalized the process for getting the rebate. But anyways, there is a rebate possible for a GST, but the point
they're
of
working on it.
Yeah, they're working on it. The point of this is GST is 5%. 5% on a candy bar is a lot different than 5% on $1 million townhouse.
Yeah.
Something that you really have to consider. It is money that you have to have up front. It's a cost that you have to pay up front. And because there's a rebate available, you still have to have the money up front. You're going to get the money back. You're not getting an exemption on it, which leads really good into the next one, which is property transfer tax, Austin. And Austin, I'll let you take this one, but there is an exemption possible for this depending on what you're buying and if you're a first-time home buyer.
Yeah. So the old exemption used to be anything under $500,000, as you would basically, PTT would be exempt. They've now changed that so that the portion under $500K, if you were a first-time home buyer, is basically exempt, and then you pay on the difference. So again, if you buy something at $650, then you're going to be saving the $8,000 between $0 and $500K, and then you're paying the portion on the difference between 500 and whatever you buy at. So that's great. What they found.
Up to a maximum.
Yeah,
Sorry,
up to a maximum. It's not a blanket statement. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I bought a $2 million house. I still get the exemption.
What a first home purchase.
Right.
But yeah, that's super important. What we found, tactically in the market was there wasn't a ton available at the time for people under 500K. And, with that being said too, you don't just want to purchase something to save $8,000 if you're going to have to move in a year. It just didn't make a ton of sense. So that's why they converted that over, because prices have went up. Not sure if you've heard over time. Some of the other one-time costs, obviously inspections, appraisals, when you're purchasing and doing your due diligence, that can include moving fees, conveyancing fees, like lawyer fees after the contract is done with your agent. You'll need a lawyer or a notary to kind of finish things off at the end. One other thing I want to just talk about here when it comes to determining home ownership costs, but get very focused and hyper clear on lifestyle, not just budget. So, in 2026, I want people thinking about how they want to live, not necessarily just, what can you afford? Your career, the way you live your life, commute changes, school zones, walkability, future family plans. The wrong area will cost you more long-term than choosing the wrong house. So think about things like square footage and trade-offs, resale flexibility, not just about like where you're living right now, but what is the value of this asset going to be in the future if life changes, and then as well like neighborhood trends. That may play a more significant factor than the house itself. So are you in a high-end neighborhood that you're buying into? Are you right in downtown Langley where the SkyTrain might be whizzing by your door in a couple years? Like that's that will affect the value in the future. And from my experience, a lot of buyers regret where they bought, not necessarily what they bought. So just be very mindful and intentional of the area.
Hey, Austin, thankfully, there's actually some professionals out there that can help you with this. And that's going to take us into number three. Speak to the right professionals. The right professionals can help you with things that Austin just talked about and help you have a deeper understanding, specifically a realtor in this case, of things beyond what's the perfect house, what's the location, as Austin said. What are some of those other factors that play into it and how they might impact things down the line if you're looking to move or if you're looking to sell. So number three, speak to the right team of professionals. Obviously, Austin and I are professionals within the same industry. We have different roles. As a mortgage broker, Austin as a realtor, we're instrumental when it comes to purchasing a home, but there's other people that you need to consider as well. Assuming you have an accountant, it is a great resource as well. They can help with some of the other stuff we talked about, including how is my money actually being spent? Like if you're a small business owner, they can help you with things like that. Another important one, of course, is a lawyer. Austin already said that you're going to need a lawyer to complete your transaction, but
or a notary can typically do conveyancing as well.
Absolutely. But they can be a valuable resource for information and for things like first-time homebuyer incentives and how these actually work. Now, Austin and I have our understanding of it as well, but these people can also be helpful with those sorts of things. So speak to the right team of professionals and don't be afraid to ask the question. So there's no dumb questions really when it comes to this sort of thing. We're here to help. That's our job, right?
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And I think one thing that comes to mind when you're saying, hey, this is our job, to help people. I think it's also really important to be working with people that have alignment. And what I mean by that is, starting conversations early. Maybe a move is on your radar, but maybe that is a September plan after the summer. Maybe you just finished school and you want to work full time in the workforce, save up some money to help you get into the market later on in the year. Maybe you want to buy in 2 weeks. That's cool too, of course, but maybe that is a longer plan. Realtor and in mortgage broker alignment is also really important. So making sure that the person that both people that you're working with are on the same page, because it's not as simple as like, oh, I'm just going to go out and pick a place I like and that's that. So you need to make sure that your financing is in order before you go shopping. You need to make sure that your realtor is on the ball to be sending the mortgage broker all of the documents that they need in order to get financing approved. Just because you get an accepted offer on a place doesn't mean the bank is going to be like, awesome, great, let's just give them $400,000, right? There's a lot of due diligence that the bank does, and a lot of stuff that they need in order to successfully pass your file. So it's important to make sure that there's cohesiveness between your agent as well as your mortgage broker. With that too, pre-planning wins offers. Having being organized, having pre-approvals done ahead of time, like that can be the difference of you getting a place or you losing that place to someone else. And it's the best time to start these conversations isn't necessarily, when you're ready to buy. Maybe that's 6 months or 8 months in advance. So that you can formulate that plan effectively. On the realtor side, maybe that's setting up that search if you're being patient to see what comes along, see what sits on market. On the financing side, maybe you get a rate hold and maybe rates start to shift and you're locked in at a better price, and that might give you some leverage when you are out writing offers. So there's lots of little things that you can kind of do to navigate the market and get one leg up on the competition.
Yeah, very well said. Very well said. So we'll jump into the next one here, and this one's going to be more of an Austin one as well. I'm going to let Austin kind of run with this one, but it's understand local market conditions. And Austin actually just kind of mentioned this in the last point here, but some things to consider, Austin, here. I'll just throw some things out there first is what's happening in the market. Is it a buyer or seller's market? First and foremost, this doesn't necessarily mean you should or shouldn't buy. It's just knowing what the status of the market is. And things that I think of from my perspective are things going to sell more quickly because there's a lot of people trying to buy and there's not a lot of options? Or is it the opposite? Maybe things aren't going to sell as quickly, which can be nice as a buyer because I have more time. I can think about things before making a decision. We talked about this already, but which neighborhoods align with your lifestyle and your budget? And is that something that you're going to be able to grow into? Is that a neighborhood that's going to work for you more than just 2-3 years from now? And then what is it you're actually looking for? Is it a detached home? Is it a townhome? Is it an apartment? And does this have to be your forever home, or can it be a stepping stone? Austin, we'll talk more about this, but just some things to think about and understand what you're looking for as well as what's happening in the market before you start getting into the market.
Yeah, no, very, very well said. And what comes to mind when I see this topic is, national news does not necessarily, equal local reality. It's not one housing market, it's hundreds of local markets. Like even within Langley, as an example, there are some pockets that are very active and there are some pockets that are very quiet. And you can see that through stats trends. We talk about this all the time on our stats episode. You will see, even in quote unquote slower markets, some homes still getting multiple offers. There is going to be some product where buyers, have additional leverage. Buyers need to understand things like days on market, inventory trends by price point, like all of those different components. And that's why you chat with a local professional that could really help you win in certain markets for sure.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. Anything else you want to add there, or do you want to jump to number 5?
No, we're going to talk about the do nots last but not least. So this is the thing to not do if you plan on buying a home in 2026.
So yeah, we're going to take it a different direction here. So not the do. We did say 5 things to do, but just to have a little bit of fun with it, some do nots. So fairly simple. Don't make any major purchases if you don't have to, of course. I mean, I can't stop you from making major purchases. I mentioned this at the top of the episode, which was things like car loans. Car loans will affect your ability to borrow. And if you don't need to buy a new car before you purchase a new home, let's wait till you do it after. Same things with boats. Any large ticket items that are going to have a monthly cost to them, let's try to avoid that. Even if you're paying cash for them and that cash could be better used towards a down payment, for example, you got to weigh what's more important to you. And it's probably going to be a better option to save that cash for your down payment or save it for maybe some renovations or something else that goes into your home cost. And then another big one here, Austin, I'm going to throw it back to you. What's another thing people should try not to do when they're looking to buy a home?
Probably change jobs would be pretty
preferably.
fundamental.
Preferably. And let me throw a little bit more into that. So it's not saying that changing jobs is the problem. It's changing the type of job that you're doing or a completely different career. So for example, I've changed my career, but if you say one day you're an accountant and then the next day you're a baker, like those aren't the same thing. They're very different. Now, if you were working as an accountant, let's say at this firm, and then you decided to move to a different firm, well, you're still doing the same type of work. And from a lender perspective, they look at your work as continuous. You just change companies. That's not the same thing as changing jobs. But if you're changing the type of work that you're doing, it can be more challenging from a qualification perspective. So that's one thing. But again, life happens. I'm not saying it can't happen. Maybe it is time for a career change, but it's in your best interest to do so after you've purchased a home, or to then wait to purchase a home once you've changed that job. Just keep that in mind. And sorry, was there something you wanted to add with that, Austin?
No, I think as we kind of round out here, like we talk about all the time, this is general advice. There's always exceptions. So if you need more information on maybe how some of this individual stuff can apply to your situation, don't hesitate to reach out. We're always here to provide value and answer any questions that you might have. And we are wishing you all the best in 2026. If you're planning on getting into the market or making a move in the market, or maybe that isn't on your radar this year, maybe you know someone that will be, and you might have some information to add to help them have their experience be a little bit more positive. So thank you guys for joining us for another episode. We do appreciate it. As always, make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and leave us a 5-star review. It helps people find the show. And of course, if you think that this episode applies to anyone that you know, feel free to send it over to them. We would appreciate that as well. Take care, enjoy your week, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks.